Boker Tov, good morning. Today is Friday, July 17th. We are, this is Erev Shabbat Matot Maseh, when we also will be benching Rosh Chodesh Av, as we find ourselves in the second of the 3 weeks. And I wanted to think about one of the lessons that we're supposed to take from this period for our own behavior, something we're supposed to be thinking about, and I don't even fully know the application, but it's, I think, a critical lesson that we need to be mindful of. And I actually want to start with this point, which is the value of modesty is a wonderful value. It's one that we take seriously. Moshe is referred to as Anav Ma'od. He was the most humble of all people. Anava is seen as a critical virtue that a person should always be working towards, to put aside arrogance and work towards anava. That's anava. But then there's another word that's used by the sages sometimes, which is called anvetanuta. Anvetanuta, which is the Aramaic-sized version of something like that, but it seems to has something to do with exceeding anava, which is very troubling and in fact can bring a calamity. And that's where we enter the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. The sages tell us that it was Kamsa Bar Kamsa that Charuv Yerushalayim, because of the story of these two individuals, or actually about one instead of the other, that Jerusalem was destroyed. Perhaps you remember the story. An invitation is extended to Bar Kamsa by mistake, to a party that a host is making. He intended to invite his friend Kamsa, and the messenger gives the invitation to Bar Kamsa, who is Bar Devave, we're told, someone with him he has words. He's not friendly with him. He might actually be his enemy, if we want to call him his enemy. He's invited to the party, and he's thrown out. He's thrown out of the party. And and critical point in the Gemara, which is in the end referenced later, but we're not going to look at it too much, where he says, hey, the sages were all there. They're all there watching. Hoel v'yatvu rabbanan v'lo malchubei. The Chachamim were there and they didn't protest. It must be shma min akinecha lahu. I presume that they were happy with the way I was treated. And he says, that's it. I'm going to bring the whole thing down. And he goes, and the way the story goes on, he goes to the emperor, says the Jews are rebelling. How do you prove the Jews are rebelling? They're going to refuse your sacrifice. How do you prove that? Give me a sacrifice, and you'll see they're going to refuse it. And he brings the sacrifice to Jerusalem, and on the way, he blemishes it in a way that halacha says is a blemish you can't sacrifice, but the Romans would find not to be problematic at all in their code of pagan worship. And they recognize, the Chachamim recognize we're in a big, terrible mess, a bind. And they said, let's bring it. But Rabbi Zachariah ben Akula says, no, you can't, because people are going to say you're allowed to bring such blemishes. And they say, well, you know what, let's kill the guy. Because he's actually, if he goes and reports, we're all toast. And then it's going to be horrible for us. He says, no, then if we kill him, then people are going to say that someone who brings a sacrifice, which is not allowed, is chayav misa, he should be put to death, and that's not true. And so he insists, Rabbi Zachariah ben Akula, that they can't do it, and so they're paralyzed. And they don't bring the sacrifice, and the implication then is that he goes off and tells and proves to Rome the Jews are rebelling, and the next thing you know, the Roman legion is marching against the city and everything that follows. And Rabbi Yochanan says at the end of the sugya, this piece here, Anvetanuto, that's our word, Anvetanuto shall be Zachariah ben Avkulas. It was his word that Hechrivat Beitenu, that destroyed our house, V'sarfat Hechalenu, and brought about the total burning of our grand chamber, V'higlitanu me'atzenu, and it ended up in exiling us from our land. All of it because of Zachariah ben Avkulas. He's the one to be blamed. Wow. It doesn't mean everybody else is innocent. Later in the Gemara, Rabbi Elazar says, you should see how terrible the power of busha, of shaming people, is, because God in the end came to the side of Bar Kamsa because he was shamed. So that means that they blame it on the earlier part of the story and the fact that the sages didn't act. But the more extreme version of Yochanan says, forget that part. Yes, absolutely terrible, but it's the Anvetanuto. What is that? And there are those who suggest that that word means super, extra meekness. It's not humility. It's become when you are meek, when you are engaged in what better described as small think. You can't think about the bigger implications, and you're stuck in the smallness of yourself and what's happening around you. And the implication that the Chachamim understood that we can't apply regular halacha right now. We can't. We can't say refuse a sacrifice because it's going to bring to the korban and into the destruction. And we can't refuse. We had to kill this guy, even though this guy is not intrinsically right for doing the things, not himself culpable. But in this case, he's a danger, and we have to think about the bigger picture and not function with the usual set of rules. And Rabbi Zechariah can't get out of this small think. These are the rules. This is how we function, and the bigger reality be damned. And somehow he holds sway, and the sages themselves become meek in front of him, paralyzed by him and the force of his argument, and everything comes crashing down. What does this mean? It means that somehow you have to know when a moment is a regular moment, and that's how we function for the most part in our lives, with the usual reality, and the usual reality demands that we follow the rules to the letter of the law. And yet there are times which are extraordinary times, which are, where the stakes are high, and where halacha would say you can't follow the regular law. You have to act beyond it for the sake of survival. That's the rule that's put out. You got to think bigger about what's in front of you. And that, Rabbi Yochanan says, is where we failed, where the sages failed, and he blames one man for that. It's pretty heavy, but everybody else around him failed as well. To understand the moment, what the moment demands, is part of the religious calling and the message of this day. I don't have an application. I'm not applying it to our present pandemic or to our political situation or anything else. But it's an important lesson to keep in mind. We are absolutely a halachic people, and we're in 99.9% of life, and we're hopefully living in regular times. We live to the letter of the law. But in the moments when things are beyond that, sometimes a different way of thinking is present for us. And for the very sake of our own well-being, we have to be able to think bigger. Application, I leave it to you to think about the way in which we interact with people, how our norms that we usually we demand of ourselves, and the minimal demands we make of ourselves. Perhaps in this given moment, we have to make bigger demands because the moment calls for bigger actions. Let us think about that, ponder that, and wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.